For Trifecta on PJTV, I'm Scott Ott, editor-in-chief of ScrappleFace.com, and with me in a little bit will be Bill Whittle and Steve Green. You know, over the weekend, the National Governors Association met, and they held hands across party lines, sang Kumbaya, and said no to the unfunded mandates they see coming in President Obama's health care reform plan. You know, as the governors were arguing with the Obama administration over whether the states or the federal government should bear the burden of the massive cost of the new entitlement, one branch of the government has been left out of the discussion. Call him the man forgotten. John Q. Public seems to have no place at the table. You know, the real debate seems to be over which elected officials will have to break it to their constituents and then take a hit that could sink their precious incumbency. But whether the invoice comes from Washington or Harrisburg or Sacramento or Tallahassee or Jefferson City, for John Q. Public, it winds up on the same pile on the kitchen table. Amity Shlaes wrote a book not so long ago called The Forgotten Man about how government meddling turned an economic downturn into a generational Great Depression. And the Forgotten Man was the working stiff, the taxpayer who funded Herbert Hoover and then FDR's utopian social experiments. Once again, in 2009 now, our feudal lords have seized upon a strategy for buying the support of their serfs, and the only thing that stands in their way is the people who actually pay the bills. Bill Whittle from eject.com and PJTV, how does the taxpayer elbow his way into this discussion?
Well, you mentioned the governors getting together, Scott, and I have to tell you there's a ray of hope in there for me, because when a governor comes to the table and talks about federal overreach, then the governor at least brings the power of his particular state behind him. He's got a little bit of firepower. He's got a little bit of artillery. You remember a couple months ago, Governor Rick Perry of Texas was called a traitor, you know, because he talked about the fact that, look, this is not the business of the federal government. This is either the state's business or so on. I interviewed Governor Perry over the weekend, and he talked about how the governors are getting together now. They're going to go around talking about the 10th Amendment. I happen to have here a little handy pocket Constitution and Declaration of Independence, not a very heavy document because it's simple. And I'm reading Amendment 10, and Amendment 10 says, quote, "The power is not delegated to the United States by the Constitution, nor prohibited by it to the states, are reserved to the states respectively or to the people." The federal government has a limited number of authorized positions that they can take, and if they don't do it, the states do it, and if the states don't do it, it belongs to the people. And we need to get back to this idea, and I think the fact that the state governors are starting to lead the charge is actually a pretty hopeful sign.
You know, Bill, there's a guy here in Pennsylvania. I think his name is Sam Rohr. He's in the General Assembly or the state Senate, and he's pushing a resolution that simply reaffirms the 10th Amendment of the U.S. Constitution.
Kind of a shame that we have to do that, isn't it? Sorry.
We have Steve Green from vodkapundit.com and PJTV. Steve, if those who pay the bills are vastly outnumbered by those who reap the benefits of this new entitlement and many others, is this taxation without representation? And if it is, what should we do about it?
Well, it may be taxation without representation, but you were asking, how do people get back at that table? How do we get a seat at the table? How do we make our wishes, our anger known? Well, the obvious way is the Tea Party revolts that have been going on now since President Obama was sworn in. But there's another way, and it's the silent way, and it's already happening right now. Income tax receipts are down 30, 35, 40%, even more this year. It's one of the reasons the deficit is ballooning so much. It's not just the spending. It's that people are, to borrow a phrase, going galt. And when these top marginal tax rates hit 47% federal, or in the case of New York City and certain localities in California, going to edge up to 57% or more top marginal rate, people are just going to stop working. Oh, I mean, they're not going to, sell off their possessions and live in a cave. But if you have to work twice as hard for that last dollar and keep less and less and less of it, maybe 40 cents if you're lucky, you're not going to work as hard. And that's going to mean a slower economy, which is going to mean even smaller payrolls, fewer taxes. You ask how people are going to make their feelings known. I think they're already doing it.
So, Bill, do you think that's going to be enough? I mean, is the structure in place that will allow us to make the change that needs to happen here? Or do we need to do something else structurally to our government to prevent our representatives from simply using our money to ensure their own reelection?
Well, Scott, you know, you're running for political office, so I'd love to hear your take on the powers of the incumbency, but the powers of an incumbent are tremendous. And I happen to agree with Steve. You know, one of the things that they do when they're treating cancer, one of the most effective and recent cancer treatments is, rather than going after the tumor, they develop medicines that restrict the ability for the tumor to get new blood. They restrict the ability for new blood supply. That's what feeds the tumor. That's what feeds cancer cells. Needs a lot of blood because it's growing so fast. I think Steve's exactly right. The structural advantages of this Congress for life, the political advantages that incumbents have, are so overwhelming that I am beginning to take, not as my first or second or third position, as a last-ditch position, the belief that really the only way to stop this blob is just to cut off its blood supply. Just don't feed the damn thing. And if that means you have to work less and make less income for a couple years and tighten the belt to stop more of this money going into this maw, the national money pit, then what else can you do?
We're going to take that, Bill, as your rant because it was so good. I don't think you can top yourself. And, you know, when you went from modern medical treatments to leeches, I like that. We got to get the blood out of this thing. Okay, that's Bill Whittle from eject.com. Steve Green, give me your 30-second wrap.
Well, you know, they say that the governor's mansions are where presidents are made. I would like to see one of these many, many Democratic governors make a run at Obama in 2012. That would get the message across that this guy is a joke, he's a failure, and he's spending money we don't have.
Thank you, Steve Green from vodkapundit.com. And just one final word, as Bill Whittle pointed out, I am running for office. And what I found in this system is it is so favorable to incumbents that nobody wants to contribute to anybody from outside of the system until they're absolutely sure they can win. The only thing that an outsider can hope for is that the incumbent drops out. And I think the people need to rise up and across the country and say, we want to help those outsiders to get elected, because otherwise the incumbents are 96% of the time reelected. For Trifecta PJTV, I'm Scott Ott from scrappleface.com and columnist for the Washington Examiner.